Gonna make it. Okay, so there's the second one, next time.
Those are crazy.
Here, I'll
There
help.
you go.
There you go.
All right, brownies.
Yeah,
That's a
Chris.
great idea.
Hey, Chris was funny. I know Megan.
I know,
No, I
it's so
Did
funny.
we talk about that?
From a box.
Oh,
I'm not
okay. I
big.
was
you
like,
go
wow,
close the door for
I'm not
us?
super
Before you
big.
do that, let me make a piece of paper. Thank you.
Yeah, I need some water
I
actually.
know.
You're doing this.
I would share except for stuff. Don't ask questions. We don't have ice cubes in our house. These are, I know, frozen things we have. They're ice. They're frozen.
They're just like little plastic things.
It's very cool. Our tap water's hot.
It is?
Thank you.
Well, it's not cold. I'm spoiled maybe with cold water. Because we had the fridge thing, you know, at my house. So like I
Me
can't
too. Our
drink.
water is cold. We stick stuff in the fridge.
So
So wait.
can I see yours?
Chris,
Can I just find it?
good.
And we did the same thing. So I'm like,
Oh well.
I wonder if we had the exact same site. Did you go on Google to get your site?
mhm.
I'm sure it is. There's only a few.
Well, I'm just gonna stay for a little bit.
Okay, welcome. This is Mr. Bud Fry, our
Hi.
foreman.
Nice to
This
meet
is
you.
Nicole Arensky, who's the professor of this course.
Nice to meet you. How are you all doing?
We're doing good.
Okay.
Stephen?
All right, today is September the 20th, 2005, and our guest informant is Mr. Bud Fry from Weld County. And in our student group we have first,
Carissa Skillern.
and
Danielle Lillo.
Emily Maddox. Taryn Fulmer.
Caitlin Bratting.
Okay, thank you. All right. Bud, let's start out with talking about, you were born when and where?
No, I was born March the 26th, 1931, 2 miles east of Evans, Colorado, on a farm. And
Yeah.
it was a blizzard. Doctor come out in a horse and buggy, and he ended up staying there for 4 days before he get back to Evans.
Oh, is that right?
2 miles.
Yeah. So you were born at home?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And what about your family, brothers and sisters and such?
I had one older brother, and I had a younger sister and 2 younger brothers. So there was 5 of us.
Right.
Children.
And they were all born at home as well?
My oldest brother and I were, and my sister. But the 2 younger boys was born in Greeley Hospital.
But that was the people were born at home at that time?
Yes.
So a little bit about what it was like when you, the earliest recollections you have.
Well, about the earliest, from that farm, we moved out East LaSalle in 1934. And then it was about a year or 2 after that I started remembering things.
Yeah?
And it was pretty tough. That was days when nobody had anything. And everybody's in the same boat. And I went to Baby Draw School out there. Started in 1936.
And how many kids were in your class then?
There'd be about 5. When I graduated out of the 8th grade, I was 14, and there was about 9 of us, and 8 of them was girls.
Yeah?
That was pretty rough.
And the old BB Draw school at that time had outdoor plumbing, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And it was 8 grades in 3 rooms, as I remember.
Yes. Well, there was actually 9. You could go to 9th grade there.
Right.
But that's true, there was only 3 rooms.
And that drew kids from all the farming area around there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And everybody got there on their own, right? There were no school buses?
No,
And how did you get to school?
well, I walked a lot of the time, and then we finally got a pony and rode double on him, bareback. Winter, your legs would rub the hair off, but your legs stayed warm
On a horse?
pretty good on them horses.
Yeah.
So how about the group questions?
We're ready to go. Okay, ladies, who's first?
I think,
If you can all speak up a little bit, because
Okay.
we have so much, there's background noise in here, so it's a little hard to.
I think we just kind of want to know about your parents and your grandparents and where they came from and what brought them to the area.
Well, my grandparents on my father's side, they came from actually Pennsylvania. They called them Pennsylvania Dutch in them days. But on my mother's side, her dad came from Germany, and her mother actually come from England. That was quite a combination,
Yeah.
you know, really. But in them days, like when her granddad come over here, they had to have a trade. And also, they're supposed to have a sponsor before they could even come over and do it right. Nowadays, they don't do that. They just simply come over.
Yep.
And one thing, when we was growing up, we worked our own crops. Our sugar beets, we thinned them, hoed them, topped them, and loaded them by hand and hauled them on trucks. We'd fork them on with a fork. They have the excuse nowadays, a lot of these people are coming in. They come in here to do the work that the people here won't do. Well, I'm not saying it may not be so, but when we growed up, it wasn't like that. The families all worked, and a lot of the neighbors, we'd all work together on a lot of things. But it was practically all handwork, and nobody really thought anything about it much.
How old were you when you started, when you first had to start
I
helping
was-
out working?
When I started milking cows when I was 5 to 6 years old, I was actually about 5. As soon as you could sit down there and start milking cows.
How did it correspond to school times? Like, what time did you go to school from, and what time did you work from?
Well, you would have to get up early and do your chores and go to school, and then you'd have chores to do in the evenings when you got home. And and in the fall, like at beet harvest, they would let school out. And sometimes they'd start school late, so you could end up getting your crops done.
So is it pretty true that this is something that a lot of families, I mean, this was kind of the main thing that they did, was the beet harvesting?
Yes,
kind of thing.
and we had pinto beans. We'd have to hoe the beans, and then we'd cut them with horses, and we'd have shock them. And then we would stack them, and in the winter, they'd have a threshing machine come around, and then you'd have to feed them into the thrash machine to thrash them, to shell them. And it would separate the beans from the hulls, and we'd stack them up and feed them, use them for feed, bean straw.
So did you keep everything that you grew on your farm, or did you sell it to?
We sold it, sold a lot of it.
And then it went outside of the Greeley area, or did
Mhm.
it stay
Yes,
local?
they had sugar factory at Greeley, and they'd sack the sugar in the wintertime, and then it would all be distributed different areas. When
So-
we got old enough, we'd work in the sugar factory during what they call the campaign to make extra money.
Was everyone in Greeley producing the same crops? Or would other farmers produce different things?
Yes, there was a lot of beets raised. About every farmer had beets.
Okay.
For the sugar factory. Same with the grain and the beans. And, but all the farmers that work together, that have a thrashing crew, and they'd go from farm to farm, get strung out, and then they'd have the people own the thrash machines, they would bring them around. It was a hard life, but it was a good life.
What do you remember of, like, what major events do you remember growing up happening around the area?
Oh, like the rodeo come 4th of July at Greeley, they called it the Greeley Spud Rodeo, because there was a lot of potatoes raised in Weld County.
So sugar beets and potatoes, those were the crops of the area?
That was a lot of the main crops, yes. And we'd go ice skating in the wintertime.
Did your schooling end after 8th grade?
Mine did. Later on, I took a GED test at the college at Greeley to get it.
Was that pretty common of most people?
Yes. There weren't too many went to high school.
Was that even an option, or?
It was an option, but,
Okay.
But trouble was, we lived quite a ways from town. You had to go to Greeley to college, and it was a problem to go. Now my sister, she went through high school, and my two younger brothers went through high school. My older brother, he started, but he didn't make it clear through.
How often did the family make trips to town or something during the week?
They never went town over once a week, unless it was had to go out to repairs or something. But as far as going shopping after groceries and things like that, that make up lists. And also, we had chickens, and we would candle the eggs, wash them and put them in the container, and we'd separate our milk and take our cream and eggs to town and sell them, or we'd trade them for groceries at the grocery store.
So then was most of the interactions you had with family, like just your brothers and sisters? Not so much others?
Not too much. No. Once in a while we'd get company from Denver, my cousins live in town and things,
How far out of town were you? Where you
It
guys lived?
was about 12 miles to Greeley, and LaSalle was about 7 miles. Uh-huh.
So did you have any neighbors, or were you?
Oh, yes, we had neighbors. Mhm. The closest ones would probably been about a block. And Steve's grandparents, they lived about half, 3/4 of a mile from us.
How many acres was a typical farm?
Well, the typicals, most of them were a quarter section, which was 160. Our particular farm, when we moved there, it was 80. And then we leased 80 next to us. And so that made it a quarter. But there was quite a few around there with just 80 acres too. But with family, most people had at least 160, and they'd add on to it.
Now, does that 80 include like the house, or is that
Uh-huh.
was your house on near your farm, or
It would, yeah, it said it'd include your house. The farmstead, they'd call it, house and barns.
How old were you when you moved off of the farm with your parents?
When I moved off the farm,
With your parents?
well, I farmed out there for, I didn't move off the farm as really till I guess I went to drive a truck when I was about, in about 1950, 1949. And then I went to service. And after I got out of the service, I moved back to a farm. And my wife and I, after I got married, we stayed on the same farm for 40 years or more before we retired.
You mentioned the service. Where were you on the day that World War II broke out? And what are your warm
Well,
memories of
when
that?
when World War II broke out, actually, World War II started before Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was December 7th of 41, but I was still home then. That was a pretty sad day for everybody. But before that happened, why, they'd been fighting over in Germany, different places.
how did you hear about Pearl Harbor? Through the radio or newspaper?
It was on the radio. There wasn't no TVs. First TV I remember having, I think it was about 53. There was TVs, other people had them, but we didn't have one till about 53.
How did you get into the service then after, since you were home?
I was asked to go.
When though? Was it?
Oh, it was during the Korean
Okay.
conflict.
Were you sent overseas, or did you just go in, or did you go over there?
I didn't get over there. I signed up 3 or 4 times, but I was stationed and they'd sent me to California. And I got on, I was working at the post locator and post office. And I ended up staying there till I got discharged. My older brother, he had went to Korea, but I never did actually go. I just was in the States.
Is there any one particular memory or instance that stands out from your time in the service or when you were in California?
No, not too much. It was just pretty well routine.
What were you in, the Army or the Air Force?
I was in the Army. Yes, I took my training, basic training, down Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a combat engineer. Learned to build bridges and things like that. But I just...
Was it hard coming back to farming after being in the service?
Not really. A lot of that you never forget. It's awful hard work, but it's rewarding too.
Were you married before you went into the service, or did you get married after?
I got married after.
Did you meet your wife in Greeley or around that area?
She come from Milliken, Colorado, a little town.
How'd you meet her?
I met her when I was come home on furlough, and my mother and my sister introduced me to her. That's the way we met. But they sort of encouraged things, you know.
Did you have any kids?
We had two, boy and a girl. And our daughter lives in Longmont, and our son lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And when I got ready to quit farming, I offered to help him get started and all. And he just politely told me, he says, "Dad, I can't see working 20 hours a day the way you do at the end of the year and not have anything." And I really appreciated the way he told me. He wasn't married, and I don't blame him, because he could make a lot better money and do it easier. But the reason I say I really appreciated it, we had seen different parents help their boys to get started farming, and things didn't work out. And there was an incident or two that the parents ended up way back in debt, and their children would go do something else, you know, and it just wasn't too good sometimes.
What is he doing in New Mexico?
He's a carpenter. He makes furniture, and he was always good at it. I didn't discourage him a bit. In fact, I've helped him quite a bit.
What does your daughter do in Longmont?
She works for the city of Boulder in child service. She's been doing that for years, I suppose 10, 12 years.
When did you stop farming?
Ma'am, when did I?
When did you stop farming?
Oh, it was, I think about 1990, I believe. retired.
When you retired, did you sell your farm and move into Greeley, or what did you do?
Well, I moved to Red Feather Lakes to start with, and I loved it up there. It was out of town, and air was nice, good and everything. But it got so far to go to doctors and grocery stores. We had to go clear to Fort Collins. And my wife had to go quite a bit. And we also taken care of my mother. And there was 2 main trips down. And so we just moved to Greeley. I left my heart up there at Red Feather Lakes.
What did your wife do?
She put in 21 years at UNC at Greeley in food service. She drove clear from the farm every day. So that was quite an ordeal too.
What would you say was the most rewarding aspect of your career farming? What made all the hard work worth it?
Well, the day I burnt the mortgage. I did a lot of custom farming besides my own place too, to make everything work. And we had cattle. There was, if it wasn't for cattle and custom work, everything working together, you just couldn't hardly made it. It was just one of them things.
What's custom farming?
You go out and disc and plow and cut hay and bale hay for other farmers, and you get paid for it.